Hello, my name is Vahur, and I have been doing stonework for the past 45 years. Out of 45 years, 16 were spent working with granite. That meant that we built foundations for different monuments out of granite. And as we know, granite is one of the hardest stones, and to work with it, you would need very specific tools. I have noticed that the carved granite mentioned in the history books has been crafted using very unusual tools. One thing that I remember from history was that all the pyramids in Egypt were crafted using copper chisels. And they also used the same tools to make vaults and other things. For this demonstration, I have gathered in front of me 5 different chisels. The first one in front of me is a copper chisel. The second one that I hold in my hand is a bronze chisel. The third one is an iron chisel. The fourth one is hardened iron. And lastly, to demonstrate on what chisels work on which different stones, I have a hard alloy tipped chisel. Let's start with me taking turns to see which chisels work on which types of stones. And I will start with the copper chisel, and we will start with the most softest stones. The first one is dolomite, then the second one is limestone, and the third one is pure granite. So we will start going through each of them one by one. This is dolomite, and I will start hitting it with the copper chisel. As you can see, the copper chisel went through the dolomite quite easily. Now let's go move on to the limestone. So far we can see that the tip is quite sharp, and we shouldn't have any issues hitting the limestone with the copper chisel. As you can see, the copper chisel isn't doing anything to the limestone itself. Therefore, I think that there is no point in me moving on to granite with the copper chisel itself. As you can see, the tip of the chisel itself is completely destroyed by the limestone. Now, let's move on to the second chisel, which was the bronze chisel. Since the copper chisel worked quite well with dolomite, the bronze shouldn't have any issues with it as well. So let me demonstrate what happens with the bronze chisel on dolomite. As you can see, this is the effect of the bronze chisel on dolomite. Now, let's move on to limestone. Here is the result of the bronze chisel. As you can see, the tip of the chisel itself, it is quite damaged. So I don't think that we should move on to granite. Moving on to the third chisel, we have the iron chisel. Now, thirdly, we will use the iron chisel. As we saw with the two previous examples, I think we can skip the iron chisel on dolomite as it will eat through it quite easily. So therefore, let's see what happens with the limestone. As we can see, out of all the three examples, the iron chisel so far is the best. However, we can't say that this will be the best option to work with limestone. Therefore, I think that we should skip granite with this iron chisel. Now let's move on to the fourth, the hardened iron chisel, and let's see what happens if we use it on the limestone. As we have a look at the tip of the hardened iron chisel, we can still see that it retains its sharpness and it can work through the limestone, which means that the hardened iron chisel is a good tool to work through limestone. Now let's see what happens if we use the chisel on granite. Now, having a look at the hardened iron chisel, we can see that the edge itself has gone a little bit more round than it was before, which means that the hardened iron chisel is not a good tool to work on granite. Now, let's see what happens if I use the hard alloy tipped chisel on granite. The hard alloy tip steel is quite sharp itself, and therefore it should not have any issues with the granite. So let's see what happens if we use it on the stone. Now, let's have a look at the tip of the chisel itself. It hasn't gone quite round, and it is quite sharp right now still. But as we can see, the demonstration has shown that the hard alloy tipped chisel is the only one so far that can work through granite. Reflecting back on my career and how many years I've been working with stones, I am very surprised how people have told throughout the history of how tools such as copper and bronze were used on granite to build the pyramids, the Sphinx, and other structures. As we saw in the demonstration, the only tool that worked on granite was the hard alloy tipped chisel. And while we don't know the exact year when the hard alloy tipped chisel was created, we do know that it was roughly 200 years ago when it was created. Therefore, the only conclusion that we can come to, if we look back at all the pyramids, the Sphinx, and any other structures, is that something or someone else was responsible in creating those structures before humankind. There is no other logical explanation, unfortunately. Some other type of force was responsible in creating all these structures. Because we as humans did not have the tools to create those structures at that time. So, therefore, as a person who's worked with stones many, many years, looking back at what people have been telling throughout the history, everything is very strange and it is very curious to me. If anyone has any follow up questions or comments, then please let me know, and I will be more than happy to explain further and clarify any other questions that someone may have.